Thank you. Good morning once again, and I'm sorry that it has taken this long to get this done. I've never used this tablet for this purpose, so I don't know. I'm only hoping that it will allow me to scroll, which is the next challenge.
It will. Just scroll to your left, sir. It will scroll, sir.
Okay, that's
Yes,
it.
sir. Yes, sir.
But it's not.
It's not flexible, but it's manageable. Prof, we can't hear you again, sir. No audio from Prof. I think network kicked Prof out. Let's try to bring him back on board. Let's wait a bit. Prof is not still here. Okay, let me try to contact Prof. We're still waiting for Prof. I just contacted him. We are hopeful that he will join us soon. I think there's a ray of hope. I saw cross screen flash here. Yeah, Prof is back. Prof, you can unmute yourself, sir.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we
Can
can
you
hear
hear
you,
me
sir.
now?
Yes, Prof.
Angu, I was trying to call you. It's okay. I will stop. I will end the call.
Yes, sir.
Thanks for opening to help. I wonder what's happening. Joining back became an issue. Well, I think we'll do the best we can within the time. We at least thank God we have the afternoon session. I believe that will be better. So another issue that is of we're continuing from yesterday. Sorry. Still looking at environmental issues of global concern that are still bothering us. We're trying to find solutions to them. Can you hear me still? So we're looking at hazardous waste and non-hazardous waste. Incidentally, you are going to be looking at this again in your second semester. I think in ENS 816. So in this course, it is just to highlight the fact that this is one global issue of concern. And this even applies to us here in Nigeria very, very well. Now, the hazardous waste uh, is considered waste with properties that make it dangerous to handle. That is, it has the capacity to be harmful to human health, either chronically or acutely. And what's the difference? Acute challenge would be that the moment you come in contact with it, you feel the effect. If the effect is chronic, then it takes a longer time to express itself. Now, hazardous waste, again, I believe many of you are familiar with these. Hazardous waste is generated from many sources, ranging from industrial manufacturing processes, mining, general manufacturing, depending on the type of um, products you are engaged in, like the production of batteries. I'm sure many of you would have heard what happened in Ibadan a couple of years ago at the Excite battery factory and all of that. And sometimes it comes from occupational operations, for example, in hospitals. I'm not This is the other presentation that I was going to use. This is an earlier version now. I just had to scramble to get this so that we can go on. Yeah. So from industrial manufacturing, mining, occupational operations like in hospitals, and the like. So some of the hazardous wastes will present themselves in terms of will be in liquid form, in solid form, in gases, or the sludges that come from industry. For example, if we're talking about a dye industry, textiles, and stuff like that, sometimes that is where these things come. But on a general note, hazardous waste characteristics will include their flammability, particularly in the oil industry. You can have yeah, sorry. Flammable liquids or solids, that is materials that can catch fire quite easily. I mentioned source in terms of occupational operations. So sometimes you have infectious materials that come out of hospitals, for example, in their microbiological labs. Those are some waste that need special handling that are considered hazardous because some of them carry the pathogens that cause disease. So those are also hazardous. But some of them can be explosive. They'll be outright toxic. Some display ecotoxicity. And here we are looking at materials that display chronic intoxication so that over time, with exposure to the ecosystem, organisms begin to feel the effect of such substances. Of course, today we are worried about endocrine system disruptors. And I'm not speaking as an expert here, but I dare to mention, because this has come up at a different forum, increasing cases of infertility may be tied to exposure to endocrine disrupting chemicals in the environment. And this has come as a result of observations that some substances, particularly pharmaceuticals that are disposed of indiscriminately, there are some that have the tendency to cause frogs to change sex from early stage development. And so this has become a worrisome issue. So we'll be talking about that some more along the line. But you also have the general waste that we consider non-hazardous, okay? So materials that are not specifically classified as hazardous under national or international laws are what we call non-hazardous waste. This will include things like paper, wood, plastics, glass, metals, and other chemicals like effluents from, simpler establishment where the materials that come out from such operations are not considered hazardous. Okay, and we have this coming from agricultural operations, municipal and residential sources. Now, even though these are not considered hazardous, we do know that improper management poses significant risk to the environment and also human health. In this case, it's the cumulative effect that becomes worrisome. I mean, you just need to step out into any Nigerian city and look around. What you usually will see will be an eyesore, except you go to maybe GRAs, government reservation areas, or high brow areas that you may see some green and you may not see refuse dumps. But on average, it has become so common that we have even normalized it. We don't see it as anything. For those of you who live in Makurdi or even in Jos, Ibadan, Port Harcourt, cities in the southeast, up there in Kano, Kaduna, you can relate to all of this. Everywhere you go, you find uh, refuse heaps all over the place. And these are usually cocktails of all kinds of waste materials. So even though not classified as hazardous, improper disposal, starting with the aesthetics, eventually they become a challenge to the environment and human health. So handling, transport, and disposal of waste generally is regulated by government, largely at the state and local level here in Nigeria and elsewhere. But you find that this is not happening very well because of poor enforcement. I think way back in 2003 here in Makudi, I was involved in a solid waste management project. We designed a pilot project. It never took off fully. And so we are back to square one. Nothing has changed much. Now, in case of available legislation, we're looking at the management now. The establishment, forget about the word borrower here. I've edited this because these are some of the materials that we got during our own training with the World Bank, because they were being specific to people engaging with them to get money for development or for infrastructure and constructions and so on and so forth. But generally, the understanding here is that whether it's a business or a government institution, you have to comply with existing requirements for managing hazardous waste. This includes the storage, the transportation, and final disposals. And this is important, especially for hospitals. We find that many of our hospitals do not have a well-defined waste management system. And this leads to co-disposal of hazardous materials with non-hazardous materials in the same place. In many hospitals, they think incineration solves the problem, but it doesn't always follow. So you find that nobody is complying, nobody is enforcing, okay? But generally, the expectation is that each establishment will manage hazardous waste in accordance with national legislation and international conventions. And this includes those that relate to transboundary movement. And back again, I had talked about the cocoa toxic waste dump. I think sometime was 1988, thereabout. That is why the issue of transboundary movement comes in. Developed nations looking for where to dump their hazardous waste will find a poor nation that is looking for money that says, give it to us so we will take. It's almost like, let me digress a little bit. When I hear that Trump is sending criminal elements from US jails to some African countries and some other developing countries, I wonder what country will accept to receive criminals in their within their borders. But that is part of it. We find that sometimes developed nations oppress us by trying to get us to accept their hazardous waste. And that is why the issue of transboundary movement is also important. I'm getting a chat here. It's like not everybody is hearing me clearly. Mohammed. Okay, thank you, George. Now, in case of where there are no clear national legislations, we expect that establishment should the establishment should implement or adopt the general international industrial best practices for managing their hazardous waste in an environmentally sound manner. Now, if an establishment requires a third party to manage their hazardous waste, it behoves the establishment to ensure that such a contractor is a reputable one that is licensed to practice. For if there's anybody in the class who is in the Niger Delta area, you may understand this, because there are some oil servicing companies or some of these oil exploration companies. I don't know the recent development, but when I was familiar with it, what they had was they would get contractors to be managing their waste from collection, transport to disposal. And so you find people rushing to Port Harcourt then to register companies to serve as waste disposal companies. But what is required is that once you are engaging a third party, that party should be licensed and be familiar with the best practices within the industry. And what do I mean here by industry? Within the waste management system. The person is familiar with the national legislations, is familiar with the international conventions on how you should manage hazardous waste, and so on and so forth. So that you as the principal do not default because you employed or engage a third party that is not competent or is ignorant. Okay. Now, the non-hazardous waste management hierarchy, like I said, you will see it again in your second semester. We'll be talking about it again at second semester in greater detail. But on a general note, you hear people talking about recycling. We shall come to that, but in this particular course, it's just to highlight, like I said at the beginning, that this is an important and contemporary issue as well, waste management. Okay, so the hierarchy places emphasis on reducing, reusing, recycling as key sustainable practices in managing waste. So let me just move on and take us to here. I'll use this to discuss the rest of what I have bypassed. It's those are things when you receive, you'll find it, or maybe I shouldn't just rush it. Source reduction. Let me just use it here, then I will use that as summary. Source reduction includes waste prevention. You know, when you want to solve a problem, like if you have a health challenge, the doctor will do a diagnosis, they will know the root cause of your health challenge, and they will try to attack it at the root cause. This is a similar thing here, that you want to minimize waste in the first place. So if you reduce waste at source, then you have less waste to manage. And so it will become easier for you to handle. The volume will be smaller. If it is possible, don't even generate the waste. But is that possible? The answer is no. I'm sure how many hours since you woke up, all of us must have generated one waste product or the other by what we do at home. If you are now in your office, you must have done something that generated some waste. Even if a thing as simple as sweeping or cleaning your desk and stuff like that, something needs to be disposed of after you've done that. But if you begin to take measures at the individual level and at the corporate level to reduce waste generation, you have started the journey of doing the most environmentally friendly thing as far as waste generation and waste management is concerned. Now, people, like I said earlier, we talk about recycling, talk about reuse, repurposing, and stuff like that. But there are so many ways we can go about this. It's either you reuse or repurpose the materials that you consider waste, so that what should have been waste lasts longer in serving you. But this will require you sorting the waste that you generated so that you have what can be reused, what can be recycled, or what can be turned into raw materials for another industry before you are left with something that necessarily have to be disposed of. Okay? Where the bulk of your waste is agricultural in nature, that is organic really, and if it's the decomposable matter, then composting can be included in your management process so that you can convert what you have as compost. Other processes that you can employ are energy recovery management processes. This is usually important for non-recyclable waste materials, which can be processed in a manner that will generate heat, electricity, or fuel through a variety of processes. The ultimate will be what cannot be recycled, reused, or repurposed. Finally, we will end up in a landfill where you can dispose of it. And again, I will challenge you to, on your own, take a look at landfills as the final resting place of waste material generated in a community, and the types of landfills that are available, and how one might even take advantage of a landfill in terms of energy recovery. Modern landfills are usually well-engineered facilities and are designed and operated in such a manner that they comply with national and international regulations. For some of them, you can even recover a useful gas from such landfills. Again, I'm repeating myself that I challenge you to pay attention to that. You may have to look at it later. So in summary, the hierarchy is your most preferred is source reduction and reuse. Then you may do recycling and composting, like I said, if the bulk of what you have is compostable material. If it's possible to recover energy from that, for example, if you can use a biodigester to generate gas for cooking, you can go ahead and do that. It's when all that fails, that you can treat the waste and dispose of it finally, maybe in a landfill. But on average, the modern thinking is that we can use different, excuse me, let me put off the fan. Power has been restored now. The current thinking in management of non-hazardous or even hazardous waste is beyond what is shown in this slide. There's what you call the 7 R's. The presentation I'll be sending to you, I will include that slide in it. It requires us to rethink our ways, our processes, the idea being, the target being to reduce waste generation. But you can also refuse waste generation. For instance, if you enter a grocery store and all you bought was a shaving stick, you mustn't take out that shaving stick from the grocery store in a shopping bag. You can refuse to take that shopping bag. So at that level, this is the simplest example I'm giving you. At that level, as far as you are concerned, at least that one polythene bag that you would have discarded is not following you home. But more seriously, within industrial settings, you also think of alternatives that will help you continue to do your business, but then it will come with minimal generation of waste. So you rethink, the rethinking will help you to refuse to generate waste, to reduce waste generated. The 4th R, remember I said rethink, refuse, reduce. The 4th R would be reuse. If what you, let me put it, temporarily consider waste is reusing it. If not for the original purpose, you can now repurpose it. So reuse or repurpose for another use. You find that in homes now, many people, these paint buckets, and I think all of us in this class can relate to this. People use paint buckets now as buckets to store water in the home. Those buckets, those paint buckets were not originally meant for storing water. They are, ordinarily one would expect that once you have used the paint, then the bucket should be discarded. But it's a very good example of reusing what should be waste or repurposing it by converting it to a water storage container. Sometimes people even use it for storing some food stuff at home. So again, that is repurposing. When that is not possible, then you can think of recycling can think of recycling so that recycling could also include composting. But then the fifth sixth will be regulation.
Prof, it's as if network has thrown Prof out again. Oh. This network, eh?
Today's network is something else.
So we see him. I pray he comes back soon.
Mm.
Huh? Okay, Prof is back. Prof, you can unmute yourself now, sir.
Okay.
Yes, Prof.
Can you see my screen? I can't.
Yes, we can see your screen, but it needs to go to slide mode.
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to see. I can't even see it myself here.
Yeah.
This is strange.
You know, our class is quite special.
Let me do it all over again.
Okay.
Okay. I think that's it.
Yes, we are seeing it, but it's still not very clear, Prof. It's
Not
clear
clear.
now. It's clear now, sir. It's clear, Prof.
Okay.
Yes, sir. Yeah, we're on the 7R.
Yeah. So I said research, which is what many of you will be involved in. It is through your research, our research, that we can find new ways of managing certain categories of waste, new ways of minimizing waste generation, and so on and so forth. So on average, all of us are involved in all the 7Rs, okay? So let's move on to, I don't know where I am. So we've talked about this earlier, so I will move on. Energy recovery. Yeah, let me take examples of energy efficiency and renewable energy resources as a component of environmentally friendly ways of managing waste. You can use, some of you are engineers, some may be chemical engineers, so you understand this even better than I do. But some incinerators are designed such that in the course of generating heat, you can also generate power. It may not be relevant to us in this system because we are not in a temperate region. So we don't really worry so much about heating our dwellings. Rather, we think more about cooling our dwellings. So if any one of you can bring up a system that we can design so that as we are dealing with our waste, we can create a cooling environment, then it will be something very novel and groundbreaking. Now, by process changes, these are for manufacturers so that you can use less energy and I dare say also use less water. We'll talk about that in a different setting. So sometimes insulation helps to save energy. Of course, you can use more energy efficient equipment. For example, high energy demanding systems like electric motors can be adopted. I mean, electric energy demanding uh, components like electric motors can be used rather than using what will require you to use diesel or petroleum to drive your systems. So things like that. But these are things that we're all really familiar with. Of course, we talked about solar power yesterday. There is also hydro and wind and geothermal energy sources. Now, biomass-based renewable energy systems can often be combined with pollution control devices. For example, anaerobic digestion systems you can use that to generate gas that can be used, even though one may argue that you are still contributing to the carbon pool if you are doing that, but it makes it easier because in a way, it helps us produce carbon dioxide rather than methane, which is a more potent greenhouse gas. The central thinking is to rethink more efficient and environment-friendly energy sources and energy use. Now, with a particular reference to hazardous materials, for manufacturers, we require that you should consider the use of less hazardous substitutes in your production process, so that where hazardous materials are intended to be used in manufacturing, you should use operations that do not require them. This is more important for fine chemical industries. And that is why today green chemistry is a big deal. Everybody is thinking of using better approaches to chemical manufacturing. In fact, I don't know whether in this class we have anybody with some training in mechanochemical processes where you bring about chemical change, not by dissolving materials in solvents, some of which may be hazardous like carbon tetrachloride, but you simply use ball and mill to grind and you still achieve what you want to achieve. So you should avoid the manufacture, trade, and use of chemicals and hazardous materials in the first place. And this you can do by following the list of banned chemicals. Here in Nigeria, we do know that some of the banned chemicals are still finding their way into our country through our porous borders, particularly when we talk about pesticides. We shall come back to this point. Okay. So generally, it is good for us to pay attention to international conventions or protocols. If there's an exemption made for class of chemicals, remember at the beginning of, is it really a beginning of what we now recognize as terrorism in Nigeria? People were using improvised explosive devices to create mayhem, to cause mayhem. I believe you are familiar with some of the explosions that we experienced across the country, but more especially in the north of the country. The use of ammonium nitrate, for instance, the use of sulfuric acid, for instance, the use of nitrogenous substances generally. Why we need some of these things in agriculture, for example, in the manufacture of fertilizers. Why we need some of these in the manufacture of explosives that we use in construction. There were people who now were diverting these to use for nefarious purposes. So while some of these things can be restricted, some have international bans, there are situations where you obtain exemptions for them to be used. But this must be used within the context of regulatory commitments of the country that is importing some of these things. So if there's a way you can avoid the use of these chemicals, then it's better not to use them. But if you must and you seek to obtain exemption, then you should be prepared to work within regulatory compliance boundaries. Okay. We can also minimize and control the release and use of hazardous materials, the same line of thinking. Generally, in project development, the production, transportation, handling, storage, and use of hazardous materials will be assessed through the environmental and social impact assessment process. It is the advisory from the EIA report or the ESIA report that will be followed, so that at the end of the day, whatever you are doing as a corporation, as an industry, as institutions, you do it within the ambit of what the EIA or the ESIA report recommends. These are very contemporary issues we still continue to look at. Here I have a list of some relevant international conventions on hazardous waste. I'll be sending this presentation, the one from yesterday to today, this morning, to you. When we are done with what we are doing now, before we come back in the afternoon. Again, take me seriously when I say I advise you to take the trouble to get more information. As you can guess by now, these are just lectures. If you are taking any notes, that's very good. But then you are required to develop what we're presenting to you so that you will know more about this. So that if you are asked questions about them, you should be able to answer. Okay. I will turn our attention to pesticides now. This is a special class of hazardous chemicals. Let me say this from the outset, because the way we use herbicides so freely and so easily, the way we use insecticides again so freely and so easily, will appear to be as if we are not considering them as hazardous materials. There's a hand up. Mohammed, can ask your question. Please unmute and ask your question. The host. Yes, so Olabi, we're talking about seven R's. I saw a hand up. Can you hear me?
I unmuted the person already.
Dr. Kufre Efiam Essien. Dr. Kufre Efiam Essien. Forsha UK. Can you speak up? Angu, if you can. Okay, Susan, you too. If you can unmute Dr. Kufre.
So I already asked him to unmute. He has to unmute from his end.
Okay, well,
Dr. Kufe,
Good morning, sir.
yeah,
Good morning,
Dr.
sir.
Kufre, if you're ASN, go ahead.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir. Sir, I really have concern. Most especially this aspect of hazardous waste is a very interesting topic. But
Yeah.
we talk about the clinical waste. That's the one that really gives me concern because I know almost all the cities we have a clinical institution like hospital and related institutions. And to the best of my knowledge, I'm from Akwa Ibom State, and I have been involved in environmental practice, being a member of Nigerian Environmental Society. I discovered that a lot of hospitals, they don't have incinerators, and they deposit their waste in the normal waste bin along the streets. At times, you have even human parts, like when the woman put to bed, whatever that comes, those things are still dumped in the.
Yeah, it comes as a cocktail.
A normal waste bin along the streets. So, sir, my question is to even my House of Assembly. I wanted to, okay, because I wrote to House of Assembly, I wrote an article sent to them to see how they can stop that, but nothing. Have even
Yes. Your voice is coming and going, but you have made the point. Remember, I said at the beginning, when I talked about infectious waste being occupational source of hazardous material, and I gave the example
written to
of
Commissioner for Health,
hospitals.
mentioned that scavengers are still going there with their bare hand to go and pick.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Hello?
I think his
If
network
you're,
is fluctuating.
yes. But let me latch on what he has said. If you all recall, I did mention this, that I'm not sure there is really any hospital that truly handles hospital waste the way they should handle it. I did mention that sometimes they think simple incineration is all they need to do. But even at that, it is not always the solution. But you find that incineration is not even in every hospital, like he said. And I think yesterday I did, in the course of talking about something else, I think we mentioned this. You find that when you get to uh, to where they dump the waste that comes from the facility, you find that it's a cocktail of all medical waste, all in the same place. And like Dr. Essen said, you find scavengers picking things from there so freely. In fact, recently, I'm not scaring anyone. Somebody told me that I shouldn't, if sometimes these people who sell things like Zobo in used water bottles collect their water bottles from hospitals. And sometimes people use those bottles to be spitting inside and all that. And also when they collect, they just go and wash simply and begin to use them. So we should be careful. But like you said, that's a responsible citizen writing to his government, and nothing has happened. I did mention to you that in 2003, crossing to 2004, we worked on a pilot project here in Makadi. And the hope was that if the waste management pilot worked well, we would spread it across Benue State, at least in the major towns in the state. But it never really took off. And so we are back to square one. So usually it is this lack of political will, lack of proper awareness that informs this lackadaisical approach to matters as serious as this. If you go to any town, if you find a clinic in a corner, just casually walk around and see where they dump their waste. You will find sharp objects like syringes. I remember that we are still talking about HIV/AIDS spread. You find that they dump all these things and people get there to pick things and they could get pricked by these syringes and so on, and anything can happen. So in a hospital or healthcare facility at all, that is where waste reduction, sorting at source is extremely crucial so that all hazardous materials are kept separate from the non-hazardous ones, which even if they are choosing incineration, you can do that. Like waste from their microbiology lab, one approach usually is to do autoclave on them before we begin to even think of disposal and stuff like that. That's just simplistic, but just to suggest to you what one needs to do. So yes, he's right to be worried. And I guess if he's a medical doctor, it's even worse that because he's a member of the Nigerian Environmental Society, so he knows why this is important. So let's move on. Any other comment on that? Okay, so let's move on. If you can still hear me. Usually,
Yes, sir, we can.
anytime, because I've done a lot of work on pesticides, anytime I want to talk about pesticides, I start the way I started with you, that this is a special class of hazardous chemicals, which people on a large scale don't take seriously as being hazardous, because in most cases, the actual effect tends to be chronic, even though acute fatalities do occur. Now, a pesticide is any substance that you use to kill, repel, or control certain life forms, be it plant or animal, that you consider to be pests. And I'm sure all of us have used pesticides at different times, and this is the reason we use them. Is it mosquitoes you want to spray to kill? Is it cockroach? Is it weed on your farm or on your garden, etc.? Now, pesticide is a generic term. You find people saying pesticides and herbicides. That is not correct. Pesticide is a generic term. If you remember, and I would like to hear answer to this: what is homicide? When you hear that a homicide has occurred, what does that mean to you? Anybody can answer. Okay, somebody has put up two people. Go ahead, indicate so that the host can unmute you to speak. Agba Ben Stephen.
Yes, sir. Good morning, sir.
Mhm.
Based on my little understanding, I think when they say a homicide has been committed, it means any crime within the home. Basically, if maybe a child, a parent, a cousin, a relation within a family commits murder, more or less, but it has to be within the home or within a family. That's my understanding. Thank you, sir.
It's okay. Mohammed.
Mohammed, please
I thought Mohammed
unmute yourself.
Abdul Malik.
Good morning, sir.
Yeah.
Yes, sir. Good morning, sir.
Yes.
My understanding of homicide is it means killing by the same organism, that is using the same intentional killing by the same organism, like a person killing someone that belong, as in a person killing someone within. That's my little understanding about homicide, sir.
Okay. Thank you. Let's move on. The Merriam Dictionary refers to homicide as a killing of one human being by another. So, Ben, it's not necessarily because it's in the home. The homicide is, the homo is referring to the man, not the home where you live. Okay? So, the killing of a human being. So, when you hear of suicide, and I'm emphasizing the side now, CID, that somebody kills themselves, it's a suicide. So a pesticide is something that kills a pest. So the pest can be weed or other unwanted vegetation. In that case, it becomes a herbicide. If it is for controlling a wide variety of insects or killing insects, we call that insecticide. Fungicides, we deal with fungus, moles and meadows, and so on. And so on and so forth. You talk about nematicides, rodenticides for killing rodents, and so on. The central thing here is that these are chemicals meant to kill other life forms, and through this killing may control their being a pest to us. Now, because of the widespread use of agricultural chemicals in food production, people are usually exposed to low level of pesticide residues through their diets. Although there is still argument on the health effects of pesticides residues in man and animal, there's enough evidence to give us concern that these chemicals are hazardous to human health and the entire ecosystem because of their chronic effect by way of eventually, as we shall see, causing harm to the environment through ecosystem change and sometimes through fatalities that we experience. Now, pesticides or similar products or formulations should not be used unless such use is in compliance with the environmental health and safety guidelines. In most cases within Nigeria, this doesn't happen. You find that in the villages, people mishandle herbicides, mishandle insecticides, and I dare say even amongst us in this class, in the past, we may have been culprits. Now, there are pesticides that have been restricted globally. And here we're just talking generally. Any pesticide product that contain active ingredients that are restricted under applicable international conventions or protocols, such a pesticide should not be used ordinarily. When you talk about organochlorines, for instance, Organophosphates are quite common because they were substitutes to organochlorines, which were considered more environmentally harmful because of their being persistent in the environment, whereas organophosphates degrade rather more easily. But you find that organophosphates tend to be more toxic. So sometimes when you hear that somebody has committed suicide by drinking otapiapia, that should tell you how poisonous these chemicals are. I said earlier that the use of pesticides generally is associated. Why there's still argument about the effect of residues in the environment. Enough evidence has accumulated to give us cause for worry, because some of the pesticide formulations over the years, evidence show that their constituents lead to the development of cancers in humans and other animals. They cause gene mutations. They affect reproductive health. So those pesticides that contain chemicals that fall into this category must be used only within the confines of relevant international conventions. Remember, I told you earlier that sometimes it is necessary to use some of these chemicals because they are used in other areas too, for other purposes too. And so you may require to get exemptions to make use of them, but within compliance, within the international conventions and protocols. Countries are usually encouraged, have always been encouraged, not usually, to place restrictions on the distribution, management, and use of pesticide formulations and products in these categories. This is important, especially where they are likely to be used by or accessible to lay persons, like is common for us here in Nigeria. Most of our rural farmers are uneducated. They can't even read what is on the labels. And so it becomes a problem. You find them spraying these herbicides without wearing personal protection equipment at all. Okay? And so it's something that we need to be conscious of and requires a lot of awareness. Okay? Any questions so far?
So I guess no questions so far.
Okay. Can you hear me now? I was told that I was muted.
Yes, sir. Can hear you
So
now.
I'm saying that when you look at this criteria for selecting pesticides, you find that it's a tall order for our own rural farmers and on the general note because of poor education. Okay. So it requires for people in our own category to be the advocates and and awareness creators so that people get to know these things. Generally, pesticide usage should be based on materials or substances that have negligible adverse on human health. They should be effective against the target species only, which is not usually attainable. But in most cases, they tend to be selective, even though they may not be specific. Okay. They should also have minimal effect on known target species and the natural environment. It ties into what I just said, that they will be selective, attacking the target species, but the effect on non-target species should be quite minimal. Pesticide used in public health programs should also be safe for inhabitants and domestic animals in the treated areas, as well as for the personnel applying them. Many of us, we use these herbicides, particularly in the house setting, very freely, the home setting rather, so freely. Again, the use of insecticides in the home, we have to be careful. You should be mindful of this. That's why if you enter a store to buy an insecticide, you should read the label and use it as advised on the label. Pesticides also should, in choosing pesticides, should take into account the need to prevent the development of resistance in pests. Those who are involved in integrated pest management will tell you this more. Over time, some pests have developed resistance to quite a number of pesticides that have been used in the past. Of course, that is why there's ongoing research to get different types that can break the resistance and continue to help us in agricultural production as well as in our public health programs. Where registration of the pesticide or the chemical or the pesticide that contains the active ingredient that requires registration is concerned, that should be registered with the authorized regulatory body, whether it's for use on the farm or to use for veterinary purposes. All these needs to be taken into consideration. Bottom line, all pesticides used should be manufactured, formulated, packaged, labeled, handled, stored, disposed of, and applied according to relevant international standards and codes of conduct, as well as the environmental health and safety guidelines. We will take a break now. I will continue in the afternoon. In the afternoon, what time are we convening? I think is it 1 o'clock?
Yes, sir. Afternoon classes by 1.
Yeah.
1 o'clock,
So
sir. 1 o'clock, sir.
yeah, okay. So between 1 now and 1, I will clean up what we did yesterday and this morning and forward it to the platform so that you can have access to it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Prof.
Any questions?
sir.
If not, see you in the afternoon.
Yes, sir.
Thank you,
Thank you,
sir.
Prof.
Okay, you're welcome. Thank you.
Yes, Prof.
Okay, you guys